Good evening and welcome to Messages of Hope. I'm Jill Lublin, your host. I'm the author of 3 books, Get Noticed, Get Referrals, Networking Magic, and Guerrilla Publicity. And tonight I have the extreme privilege of bringing you Sark. Sark is an artist and author. Her newest book is Juicy Pens and Thirsty Paper. She has a big crayon over here. I'm not sure what we're going to do with that, but I think we'll find out. Welcome, Sark.
Oh, thank you so much.
You know, I said to you earlier that I'm a big fan of yours, and I think the first time we met was, gosh, probably 15, 17 years ago at your pajama party, because you're a specialist in fun, aren't you?
Yes, and I'm a big proponent of people resting.
Resting?
Yes, resting and napping.
Oh, I love that.
You know, one of my 15 books is called Change Your Life Without Getting Out of Bed.
And did you write it in bed?
Of course, in pajamas.
Your big thing is pajamas, isn't it?
I'm a big lover of pajamas. I'm a big lover of comfort, of people feeling good and comfortable.
So where does that stem from?
I think it stems from growing up in Minnesota, where a lot of people were uncomfortable, including my parents, who were secret nappers. I don't know if you know any, but my mother would be on the couch completely deep in a nap, and the phone would ring, and she'd literally wake out of a sound sleep and say, "Hello?"
Like she's been up for hours,
yeah.
Right?
And then if someone would say, "Did I wake you?" "No, no, I was just vacuuming." You know, and I thought, why can't we tell the truth? Why can't we say, I was napping, it was wonderful?
So did you feel like a need for a nap since the time you were young?
Well, yes, and actually it comes from a sadder place. I was being abused by my older brother in the family, and so I would stay up at night to try to defend myself, and then I would have to sleep in the day to try to make up the sleep that I lost. So that really turned me into a nocturnal person, and so then I started writing about being nocturnal, and it became a lifestyle. But it's interesting because about 3 years ago now, I changed my diet and exercise and completely changed into a day person.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, after 46 years of being nocturnal. So
this actually did start your whole creativity, juicy stuff, because I know you're known for all that, and you have posters and books and all kinds of fun things. But what I'm fascinated by is it's a lot about creativity and expression, and as you say, napping and comfort. But tell me how. I hear this started in a bit of a painful place, we'll call it, and I know that I read an interview of yours, and you talked about the fact that nothing else was working in terms of, well, you just thought you'd give creativity a try. Tell me about that story.
Well, I'll just start by saying, yes, books and creativity and my imagination really saved my life, because during those years of abuse, I escaped into my imagination and basically lived there. And I climbed up in the apple tree branches in my backyard, and I'd made a little bookshelf up there, and I'd be up there reading everything. And it really was a way to get away from what was going on in the family. I also made a very important friend in the neighborhood at that time who was a man named Mr. Boggs, and he was 80 years old, and I was 10 years old. But he was my best friend, and I went over to his house every day after school, and it was really a refuge, and it was a place where someone really loved me. And he wanted to teach me to look close and to look far, so he bought me a microscope and a telescope.
Oh.
And he also tried to teach me to play chess, but I was too impatient, so that didn't work. And he called me his twirly friend because I used to do wheelies in his driveway. And then he got really sick, and he went into the hospital, and my mother said, you know, Mr. Boggs is probably not going to make it back out. He's quite ill, and he's 80 years old, and I just want you to be prepared. And I said, well, then I need to write him something every day he's in there. So I did, and I wrote him something every day for a month.
And you were 10 at the time.
Yes, and he did get out. And he said, I think you saved my life. He said, no one else called or wrote while I was in the hospital, and I had to get out to see you.
What kinds of things would you write him?
Oh, I made him little books and drawings and, you know, cutouts, and I just sent him love. And so I immediately knew if I could do that for one person, what might I be able to do for the world? So I came in and said to my mother, I'm supposed to be a beacon of hope and write books for the world. And she said, eat your peanut butter sandwich. So, but that didn't stop me, and I wrote my first book that summer of when I was 10 years old. And I'm always happy to say that the art in it is not very different than the art I do now.
That's fascinating. So the artistic talent was there always, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Well, and so were the words, really. Because
yes.
I know you do a lot around inspiration and fast, quick sentences, you know, those juicy things, as you like to call them.
Well, I like to think of writing like ripe fruit that you can pick up anywhere and take a bite and get something nourishing or juicy. I was really inspired as a child by comic books. So that marriage of words and art is, I always tell people, delight yourself first, and then others can be truly delighted. Like, don't try to go for a market. Delight yourself and your heart, and let what comes from your heart onto paper or out in the world or through words, or, you know. We in this culture in America divide up the creative people from the other people, and it's absolutely crazy because everybody is creative. Parents are the most creative people that we have, by the way, and a lot of parents don't think of themselves that way. You spend the day with a toddler, if you're not creative, you will be dead at the end of the day.
You'll definitely need a nap.
Yes.
So this, if I may just go back a little bit, because it fascinates me about the abuse, and yet the truth is that's the message of hope, that actually your creativity was born from that.
Oh, yes.
Really.
And I've written about it in Inspiration Sandwich. I wrote a chapter called Transforming Negatives, and I talked about the gifts of abuse. And I say, I don't recommend this route. You don't have to go be abused to find these gifts. However, whatever we're given, you can make something good out of it. And that is the message of hope.
Yes, it is. And that's beautiful. And for you, it was obviously a therapy that worked.
Yes. Yes, and then a lot of good therapy after that. You know, a lot of self-healing, a really good therapeutic support, which went on for years and still continues, helped a great deal.
So when you were 10 and then into your teens and adult life, whatever that is, right? I can imagine some people maybe don't think you're an adult when they read your books.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I have a theory that color was taken from adults. That a lot of adults see Sark books as so colorful that they must be for children, because only bright colors are for children. And yet adults resonate to the bright colors also. And it's just so interesting to me. I mean, especially men. You don't see men walking around very much in purple shirts or red ties. I mean, it's just very, there's a lot more, you know, and we love the tertiary colors. It's just, I just feel like there's animation in color. And so I'm really speaking to all the children inside of all the adults.
For our children to come out and play.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of that's the other interesting misnomer. There's a lot of well, you've read the books, you know, there's a lot of depth in the books, and yet they are perceived sometimes as lighter material because of the color. But I will never change that, because the color delights me.
So when you were, you know, becoming a young adult, did you say, well, I'm going to be, I mean, I heard you say it at 10. Did this keep going with you in terms of, I'm going to write books, I'm going to be an author, I'm going to be an artist?
No, it did not. That's a great question. I published I wrote my first book at 10, and I was not published until 35.
Wow.
So there was a lot of silence, and there was a lot of self-destructive behavior, and there was a lot of adventurous living. And there was a lot of procrastination, perfectionism, and fear. So I studied all those subjects, and I developed methods and systems to work with those energies and start to publish a book a year, which is what I've done.
But what happened between 10 and 35, or let's even say 18 and 35, right? Like, what were some of your first jobs?
Well, I had a grandfather who was also my mentor who said, do everything you can think of doing so you know what you don't want to do. So at age 14, I promptly got 3 jobs. And that led into from the ages of 14 to 26, I had 250 jobs. And I kept a small notebook and I wrote them down. I was fired from most of them. I quit many of the others. I discovered I was mostly unemployable. At age 26, I finally said, I'm an artist and writer, and I'm going to do this, and I don't care if I starve. And that was very self-fulfilling, because then I did starve. But I also opted out of the money system, because in my 20s, I had met and become close with various millionaires. I had become very interested in millionaires and they in me. And so I traveled around the world with millionaires, and I lived on various islands, and I'll be revealing more about this in a memoir that I'm writing. But the point is, I felt like they were the unhappiest people I'd ever met. This was all inherited wealth, and I thought money must be the problem. And it wasn't until years later that I figured out money was never the problem. These people were the problem.
Well, I'm curious, what got you interested in millionaires?
I was just fascinated. I was fascinated with what they were doing. I met a millionaire when I was 17 in the Bahamas. I was going to college in Florida, and I was over in the Bahamas on a vacation and met the guy who owned the island. And he was just fascinated by me because I couldn't be bought. I wasn't interested in his gifts. I wasn't interested. I was, I was pretty determined at that age to have my own, if there was anything to be bought, I was going to be buying it.
Well, that or put your books out, right?
Right, right.
So then you start traveling around doing this whole millionaire round, right? I love that. I hope you discovered you wanted to be a millionaire or
well,
not.
I did. I wanted to be a happy, healthy millionaire who was helping other people and sharing resources, which is, I didn't see much of this from the millionaires that I knew.
Well, I love the fact, okay, so you talk about taking naps and being comfortable, and how do you stay inspired?
Well, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because growth requires discomfort, and a lot of people hide from that. Earlier in my life, I definitely went more for comfort, and I hadn't really gained the depth and maturity that I am so happy to have now. But I learned a lot about, what we most avoid is sometimes what we need to explore, and so to get comfortable with discomfort.
So I know you have these like pajama parties and events where you have people, in a way, shall we say, explore their own creativity?
Well, I wrote a pretty famous poster called How to Be an Artist, and it's my statement that we are all artists of life. And so it really is my statement, and with this book, Juicy Pen's Thirsty Paper, that we are all writers of our lives, that everyone is a creator. And so yes, absolutely, whoever comes to a Sark event is there maybe initially to meet me, but they're actually there to meet the community of people who have gathered. I like to say that the Sark spirit comes through me. I just take dictation, and everybody else can. The Sark spirit is inside everybody.
And what would you call the Sark spirit?
Oh, it's juicy. It's like when I wrote Succulent Wild Woman, I said we all want a ripe, rare, original, eccentric life. We do. We want the adventures, and these aren't things that cost money. These aren't things that cost money, and you don't need to go find millionaires. This is about taking the stuff of your life and really letting it be juicy and succulent and living that way.
Yes. Well, I think I told you also that when I came to your pajama party, having read your books and loving them, I met one of my now dearest friends, and at your pajama party she wore a duck hat. And I thought, I got to meet this woman, because anyone who would wear a duck hat in public at 4 in the afternoon, I got to know. And she's become one of my best friends for, gosh, now 18 years, and introduced me to my love. And isn't that great?
And does she still wear her duck hat?
She still has it. I don't know if she wears it all the time, but I'll check in with her.
Okay, good.
Now, I know that you're named Sark, but I suspect that isn't your real name. How'd you get Sark?
Well, Sark's an acronym. I have 4 names. And I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota as Susan Kennedy. And in the 1980s, I developed a relationship with an author named Henry Miller through his books. So he became what I call a paper mentor. We can all have mentors through books. We don't have to meet the person. So I read everything Henry Miller wrote, and then I didn't know it, but he died, and he came into my dream, and he said, your name will be Sark, and your artwork will be famous before your writing. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be Sark. That's a dumb name. And I wrote this dream down in my journal and put it aside. 2 weeks later, he appeared in another dream, and he said, your name will be Susan Ariel Rainbow Kennedy. And I thought, that's so pretty. I'm going to add Ariel Rainbow to my name and make it legal. So in court, I was doodling on a piece of paper and realized it spelled Sark. So my art began to be published in the San Francisco Chronicle in 1982. And it ran for 6 years every Sunday. So many people began to know me through that before my first book was published in 1990. And so he was right.
Yes, and so that felt okay? You don't think it's a dumb name anymore?
As soon as I looked down in the courtroom and saw that it said Sark, I didn't think it was a dumb name at all.
What do you think's the best thing to do in bed while you're napping?
Oh, well, what kind of show?